Well, you'll never figure this out by looking at his situation right now, but Larry is on the road. He's in a dark, dank hotel room.
I
Larry,
am. I am. But, I have my background to cheer me up.
that's right. That's right. And so you're getting ready for a hoped for liftoff of Starship later this week. Yeah.
Yeah, let's not, I mean, the less we talk about it, the better. But I'm very excited. Things are moving in the right direction in general.
Yep.
Um, what's really interesting, I'll tell you what's more interesting than the prep and getting ready to launch Starship for the third test, flight test. What's very exciting is that they're already testing the next ship to fly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're doing that, right in the middle of this prep, where they're just 2 days away from their first flight, from their proposed flight. So what that's telling me is that, we waited 8 months between the first flight and the second flight, 4.5 months between the second and the proposed third flight. I think it's going to be less than 2 months, maybe even 1.5 months to the fourth flight.
Because aren't they plotting for like 8 this year or something like that?
They called on 8 this year, but 8 in a year is for a rocket this size, and just think about the pressure on Boca Chica and on the infrastructure there. I mean, that's something else, man. It's something. And remember, we're already in March, so we've only got 3 quarters to go.
Right.
So we'll see.
I think the most amazing thing about the Starship, besides just the science of it and the fact that it's going to happen, I think the most amazing thing is if it goes into orbit and if it comes back and does a decent landing on the ocean, like it's supposed to, just proving that it has the ability to land that way. It will not get headlines.
No, but
there'll be stories about it, but it should be go to war headlines on every news organization in the world. This is a breakthrough.
It changes the
proportion.
United States. It changes the United States strategic situation.
Absolutely. Yes. In so many
at every level.
Communication,
yes,
transportation.
Strategic space access, yes. The future of travel, yes. Just on every level. Every level.
Yeah. And it won't get a headline. It just blows my mind. All right. Well, we had Forbes out today with an article, and they were attempting, this is a futurist guy. I didn't write down his name, but he's typically putting together articles about what he thinks going to happen in the future. And he's taken a look at 2030 in the AI space. And he says over the next few years, these companies, meaning Tesla and others, he said Tesla in the lead with regard to robots, they will ramp from small-scale customer pilots to mass production. And by the decade's end, expect to see hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of humanoid robots deployed in real-world settings. So I see the groundswell, beginning to see more and more reporting, more and more articles on the robots. What do you think?
I'm absolutely aligned with him. I think that everybody's keen to see robots in the factory yesterday. They're not going to be there yesterday. They're not going to be there tomorrow. I think, next year, if there are robots in any factory this year, it'll be for hype purposes. I think that we'll see really useful, and some of the companies that I know quite well now are aiming to do proofs of concept, and they're aiming for, third quarter, fourth quarter this year. I regard those as done for cash raising purposes. I think that the really useful work is going to be done during the course of next year.
Mhm.
I mean, useful
Yep.
trial test work is going to be done because the biggest issue is training these bots. I think a lot of the physical problems, the problems of design are being tackled this year. I haven't seen a single bot move with the level of skill that I regard as necessary for real world use. I think we are rapidly advancing towards that level of skill. Anyway,
Sure.
bottom line is I agree with him. I think next year is going to be the year of great excitement, where we will see multiple different robotics companies demonstrate really useful work at speeds that are meaningful. You know, right now, bots from all these manufacturers can do a little bit of apparently useful
Mhm.
skills
Right.
on video.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And video is easy, you know. Prototypes are easy, production is hard, is what Elon said. I think there's a corollary to that. The corollary is video is easy, real life is hard. So
Yeah.
I think we're moving in the right direction. I think we've definitely seen a lot of good stuff. And I will say that the FSD work that we're seeing now is absolute proof of the approach that Tesla is taking to, you know, video in, purpose out.
Right.
So I'm very heartened by that. I'm very heartened by that.
Yeah, Bradford Ferguson put up a post earlier today. He says V12 has nearly, of course, maybe everybody doesn't know, he's traveling across the country, both directions, meeting with a lot of the interesting folks from the community and taking them out for drives and whatnot. And he says that V12 has nearly perfected roundabouts. Tesla's self-driving V12 has fixed nearly every issue in his neck of the woods in Carmel, Indiana. So he's getting pretty impressed, although almost everybody says it's still making quite a few mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
But those should, I think, go away over a bit more time.
Well, the more mistakes it makes right now, the better, the more information they get. I'm a little concerned that the wide release has taken this long, has been delayed this long. That's of concern. But I will say that everything I've seen so far looks very, very good. You know, I've just traveled, I'm now, I guess, 1,200 miles in, 1,300 miles into my trip. Traveled, you know, all the way from Raleigh, North Carolina, down I-85 to Atlanta, and now I'm going across along the Gulf Coast on 10. And I haven't intervened, not once.
Wow. Holy mackerel.
Not once.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So what I'm trying to say is that even the old stack on the highway
Yeah,
is doing brilliantly on the highway.
yeah.
Now, you know, I have a high level of trust, and I've grown very familiar with the, you know,
Bakery.
the vagaries of the product. And I've got a lot more confidence now than I had earlier. So I would have intervened many times before.
Yeah,
And there's some, you know, there's some obvious problems that I know about. And so when they occur, I just let them be. Sometimes when you're passing a truck, the car will suddenly, you know, let off the pedal because it thinks the truck's moving over.
right, right.
It doesn't position that truck very well. And little foibles like that. But you know, it's not that I determined not to intervene.
Yeah.
It's just I'm relaxed.
Yes, yes,
You know,
yes.
I know what I know what the problems are, I know where the problems are, and I'm very relaxed about it.
So, of course, this is Good News Monday, and we did have the stock up today. It was
A little bit.
a rather odd rotation today. So there was a rotation out of the favored 4 of the Mag 7 into the unfavored 3. So that was a pretty odd rotation today. And of course, the rest of the market was down as well. But Tesla, for some reason, got the good wins today. And I doubt whether the fact that Berlin was coming back up on the grid today had much to do with that, but that was certainly a good piece of news to have that have them back up ready to ramp again.
Yeah, and it could be because the stock had drifted down for various reasons, but it definitely took a downward turn with the Berlin news. Berlin news is very very what is the word that I'm looking for? Very upsetting, actually.
Yeah.
Because it really, we begin to see the schisms within Europe. We think our society is, rent into these two camps. But in Europe, we have multiple different camps that are, very worrying. Anyway.
Yeah.
Good to see Berlin getting back up to speed.
There was an odd situation on the in the stock market today that I just had to bring up, Larry. I don't really want to talk politics on the channel, but from time to time, it's interesting in terms of the reaction on the stock market. So we had Trump being asked about TikTok,
Yes.
and he mentioned that TikTok. He says, "Listen, I'm a little worried that if we take down TikTok, it'll help Facebook." And if it helps Facebook, he says, Facebook is the enemy of the state, and the Facebook stock or Meta stock dropped 10% in minutes. What did you think about that?
I think it's very unhealthy for a presidential candidate to single out a corporation in that manner. I don't like it when the president does it, and I don't like it when a candidate for the presidency does it. Presidents have enormous powers. Teddy Roosevelt, unfortunately, set the pattern many decades ago, and he was a very activist president, which the Republicans got because he was the vice president. They never had any clue what he was going to do. McKinley was shot and he became president.
Yeah.
God, it really changed. I guess it changed many things in business and, well, in presidential politics. He was a populist, but getting back to the pointer against Meta, I think it's very unfortunate that these companies and Tesla and Elon have become embroiled in politics. I think we would be all better off if we were not. Now, I do understand, and I have some sympathies for Elon's position politically. I'm very aligned with him, but on the other hand, there are responsibilities that you incur when you take certain positions. When you're the CEO of a large public company, when you are the nominee for president, and we're breaking those barriers of behavior, that we're breaking those norms of behavior. And if Elon does it, and if Joe Biden does it, and if Trump does it, it's all equally not good.
So in a variation of that, we had Joe Rogan. So in the same vein, Joe Rogan says The Democrats almost universally control social media, except for this one wild African American. This is a one wild genius dude who decides to buy Twitter. If he didn't do that, we'd genuinely be, I won't use the F word, we'd be in a real pickle. So,
I'm absolutely aligned with him. Look, I support Elon's move on Twitter. I support Elon's policies on Twitter. I think on X, can't get out of the habit. On X, I think the fact that he bought Twitter is a positive. I think his policies on Twitter are outstanding. They're very, very, very special in today's age. And Joe Rogan is 100% right. But Joe Rogan should say it, Elon should.
yeah. So I did a poll today. Let's switch to the general economy now. And I did a poll today, Larry, because as you know, I've been coming closer and closer to you on this whole business of maybe going into a recession here. And the poll that I ran was the question: are you fearing a layoff? Do you think that you might be laid off this year? Larry, I just looked a little while ago. I had 40 or 50 votes. And of those votes, 40% of the people that voted one way or the other are afraid they're going to be laid off this year. Now, I did that poll because I saw some other notices like that. I saw a couple of other articles, one from the India something, I forget the name of it, that was even higher than that in their poll of Americans saying that they were afraid of being laid off. Thoughts?
Yeah, I would be very cautious of any Indian publication because
Okay.
my experience is that a lot of these Indian publications are fly-by-nights or not reliable or not trustworthy. But I think it's worth testing this on a larger poll. And so it may be good to get together a few guys and sponsor a very wide-ranging poll like this, because I'm convinced, Mayor Thacker, he's actually, I don't know if you follow him, but he's got a lot of very solid evidence that, we're functionally already in a recession. Kathy has spoken about, and I have concurred about this rolling recession type of idea. And certainly we're in recession in several areas of the economy. There's no doubt
question.
But I think that we have entered into this general recessive environment. And it'd be interesting to break down the actual components of growth moving forward if they report growth. And I'm sure they're going to report growth. That they know that they're going to report some growth, but I have a lot of doubt about it.
So I know that I'm a fan of Trueflation. I think you're a fan of Trueflation. Even Chairman Powell has mentioned Trueflation. Well, they're broadening out now. I think they've got some money behind them now, and they're starting to broaden out what they're doing. And they're doing at least 1 or 2 spaces a week. I think sometimes even more than that on X. And they did one this morning where they invited, I forget her first name. Her last name is DiMartino Booth. That's how she goes on X, is at DiMartino Booth. She is the CEO and chief strategist for QI Research. She was the former Federal Reserve insider, and she's an economist by trade. It was a very good interview. I've seen her before. I've been following her for a while. She's quite bright. She agrees with you that we are already in a recession. She brings up these points, Larry. I'd like to go over them. She says this has never failed to say that you're in a recession. The Federal Reserve, the Fed, rather, the Fed does their analysis of unemployment levels by state.
Yeah.
And she says that every time that every state in the union had rising unemployment rates, we've had a recession. And we've had that situation since October.
Is it every state in the union?
Every state, she said, all 50 and the district were all showing increases in unemployment.
How does every state show increases in unemployment when nationally they don't show increases in
No,
unemployment?
we're showing we've gone from 3.4 to
Yeah,
3.9
yeah.
unemployment.
So what she's saying is that we don't have a localized recessionary environment for a particular state or therefore a particular industry that is concentrated in a certain number of states, causing the whole number to go down. But in fact, there's a general recession across every state.
Exactly.
That's amazing. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, that
She's
was
right. She's right. That is a very strong indicator of recession. Very strong.
Then she matches that with another crazy stat. She says there has but not been a single private sector net full-time job in the economy since February of last year. So all of the increases, any increase in the number of full-time jobs has been government. The full-time job situation in the private sector has been negative since last February.
And that's a double negative. That is a double negative because, you know, a, a gross increase in government employment is generally a drag on the economy. Why?
Absolutely. Yes.
Because it is
Almost by definition.
counterproductivity.
Yes.
Because they don't produce a product. No, I mean,
I know.
I understand the philosophical view, absolutely agree with it, but in reality, it actually contributes to reduction in productivity.
Right.
Yep.
Yep.
So she absolutely aligned with her on that.
Okay, so then she says that if you spent a lot of time, which she apparently did, listening to the earnings calls in the first quarter, she says, which was the fourth quarter earnings call, that the ones that were just over the last 4 or 5 weeks, she said, if you listen to those calls over and over again, the owners or the C-suite individuals that were being talked, that were giving the earnings calls, said they can't increase their prices anymore. Way too much resistance to increase prices. So the only way they're going to be able to hold on to or increase their earnings is by what? By lowering costs, and that means laying off. And many, many of them said that's the direction that they're going.
Yeah, I'd like to correlate that to what's being said to date on the current earnings calls. It would be a good exercise to put into GPT-4.
Oh yeah,
to take the current earnings calls to date and process them and see if pricing power or costs can be are being passed on to the consumer.
right.
Because earnings call to date have been a little mixed from what my gut tells me. We're not seeing a lot of positivity. We're not seeing a lot of negativity, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Not negativity, but just not positivity either. Yeah. Yeah. And in fact, the National Federation of Independent Business poll is out tomorrow. So I'll be reporting that on my show tomorrow morning. And that is one of the questions they ask. Are you able to pass along prices? Are you still getting price increases? That's one of the main questions. This NFIB report is something that hardly anybody talks about. It is, I think, it's another one of those things like the transportation, the freight number. It's something people should be paying a lot more attention to. It's 40% of the economy.
Yeah, we could come up with an index, a Randy Larry index that we choose our important components.
That's right.
And report on them. And we have enough. I mean, it's easy enough historically to build that, to take that index back over the years. And
absolutely. Yeah.
see where we stand. Yeah.
All right. She also said there's no new stimulus, not a chance in the world that the government is going to be providing any new stimulus until the earliest April of 2025, because nobody's going to, the current administration can ask all they want, but the Republicans aren't going to give it to them. And the Republicans, once they get in office, they're claiming they're not going to be doing more stimulus. So federal stimulus is probably not going to be the thing that's going to help this year. Whereas last year, it was pretty much the whole reason that we had the big bump in the fourth quarter, in addition to something that I've just been learning since Kathy spoke the other day, this huge increase in inventory, or shall I say, not enough decrease. That's also a contributor to the gross domestic product.
So if people didn't listen to our 1 hour long analysis of Kathy's analysis
Saturday,
that would be Kathy Wood of ARK Invest.
right?
It's worth reminding them that Kathy showed a slide where there's been this huge increase in inventory in retailers' hands.
9% overhang.
9% overhang, which means it's 9% more inventory at this point in the cycle that they, that they would expect to have. And that's a pretty serious situation, because what it indicates is that there's going to be a very significant reduction in orders that they make going forward. And, it looks like next quarter is going to be a very, very, very tough quarter. Very, very tough quarter.
Well, I'm doing this a little bit out of order that I should have done it, Larry, but she did some of the research that you wanted to do. And she said that the kind of change in the numbers that we saw, that the jobs numbers last Friday, she says the last time revisions were downward by 124,000 in one period was September of 2008. So let that sink in. The last time we had that kind of revision.
That's incredible. And I think those revisions are because so much of the jobs are being taken up by temporary workers.
Yeah.
That, they don't have
part-time workers.
Yeah, I mean part-time, sorry. Shouldn't say temporary, but well, they probably are temporary. But so it skews their statistics, and they don't have a good track record. They don't have a track record,
right,
of how to balance that out. So yeah, it's pretty serious situation.
So she also points out that the central banks are buying gold. So we've been wondering what the heck was going on with the gold market. I've read, I can't tell you how many articles. It turns out China is kind of in the lead on that. They bought a big, big amount of gold.
You know why?
And other central banks are buying gold as well.
You know why?
Well, she told me, but go ahead, Larry.
I think it's because of the politics of holding dollars now. None of the banks, none of the central banks, certainly on the, on the communist side of the slate or on the dictatorship side of the slate, want to own dollars anymore, because they, those dollars can be frozen. So there's this trend towards gold. I think that we should have figured that one out.
We should have.
What did you think? What did you think?
Yeah, she also thinks a part of it too is that the Chinese are getting ready for a stimulus. They know that their economy is in big, big trouble, and so she thinks they're going to print a lot of dollars, and so that's
No, a lot of yuan.
I'm sorry, a lot of yuan. Yeah, and there is a lot of evidence that that's what is going to happen. I've seen other articles on that as well. So
we can have a conversation about China. I think China has both structural problems as well as financial problems. And I think it's worth having a conversation about China, because I don't think printing a lot of yuan is going to be a solution, because the structural problems they have militate against them being able to inject a great deal of money into the economy and have it impact the economy. I dealt with this in my 2014 talk. I think I mentioned to you that I talked to I had this 2014 talk that predicted the decline of China what I didn't predict is how long it would take and how long that cycle is going to run.
Yeah.
But you know, the situation in China is not good. It is actually very serious. And I'm not sure that apart from the structural as well as the financial problems they have, you know, the short-term financial problems, the debt problems they have, and the structural problems they have, the structural, how their economy is organized, because the whole economy is primed through the SOEs, the state-owned enterprises.
Right, right.
So I don't want to get into it now, but it makes it incredibly difficult to actually implement policy. But at the end of the day, without significant structural reform, as well as process reform, they're not going to get anywhere. And the problem is that their leadership right now, actually, their leader, not their leadership, their leader is so divorced from, so disconnected from what is really happening. They can't tell him what's happening.
Yes.
He can't understand what's happening. Therefore, he can't give the orders that empower them to do even the things that they can do to make the difference. So I think that China faces very, very, very serious problems. I don't know how that ends. It could end very badly because, you know, they could seek a military type of approach to disturb the, you know, as a solution to their problem.
Of course. Yes.
It could be disastrous. But I just don't know how they solve that problem. I mean, Xi could die tomorrow. Yep. Literally, he could pass away tomorrow, and we don't know who would emerge because there's no obvious
succession.
There isn't a process left for succession.
Yeah.
It's not as if there isn't a person that they've assigned. There isn't a process left for succession. Normally, the leader chooses his successor and he's groomed over a certain term, a certain period of time. Well, Xi is now dictator for life.
Yeah.
And dictators for life do not choose successors. They do not.
Too dangerous.
And so, you know, I don't know what happens. I don't know. I think that as long as Xi is the leader, the problem gets worse. And if Xi is no longer the leader, then the problem is very serious. So,
yeah. Well, one of the biggest takeaways I had today, Larry, was not even the part that we've just been over with regard to this truflation story. You've probably heard me say, I know I've said it on this channel before, I am a big fan of truflation's stats. Sometimes I'm a little worried about their data accumulation, but apparently that's getting better and better and more true to form. We'll see how their expectation for tomorrow morning is a 2.9%. So they're in the middle of what people are expecting tomorrow. It's 2.7 to 3.3, and they're coming in at 2.9. We'll see how they do this month. They didn't do very well last month. But my analysis of truflation's analyses, their ability to analyze the situation and make good decisions, so far has not been that great. And this is another example, and it goes along with something that Jay Powell has been talking about. And that is this worry that we're going to have a repeat of the inflation situation, the double whammy that we went through in the late 70s and early 80s. And so they put up a chart, and I'm not going to put the chart up right now, but basically what you can derive from this chart is that the pattern is following, but it's following at a higher level, bigger numbers, higher inflation right along the entire chart. And what the chart shows is that last time it never got under 5% before it went back up. That's a lot different than getting down to 2.5 or 1.5% right now. There's also a much different reason for why we got into inflation in the first place. This time it was an abrupt, unpredictable, unplanned situation. Last time it was over many, many years that the oil crisis was developing. And finally, number three, the last time, the only reason that we had the second leg was because we had an oil shock, a second oil shock that got things going back up on the inflation front again. So that's.
I mean, the sudden rise in the last month, in the last year and a half.
No, in the 80s. I'm talking about in the 80s. When
look, the 80s, I think you're making a structural error in your logic.
In my logic. Oh, okay.
Yeah, the inflation in the 80s was not about oil. It was not.
Okay.
There was a correlation between oil price rise and inflation. Inflation in the 80s was all about money supply.
Okay.
I mean, if oil hadn't budged an inch, we would have had about the same level of inflation.
Okay.
It had to do with the unlimited amount of money that the Federal Reserve was printing.
Well, that's always, of course, the underlying reason for inflation.
Right. And so the fact that there was an oil shock, there was a shock in all commodities. Why? Because all commodities were subject of this enormous, cash, buying it and buying it and buying it, and this enormous, just this whole cycle of inflation. So you're assuming the problem was oil because oil rose so high, and and caused some real ructions in the marketplace.
Right.
But oil didn't rise by itself, and it didn't rise because Saudi Arabia decided to restrict it. Oil rose because of inflation.
Okay, but oil, I was a big buyer of oil products during that second leg. I was buying plastics, I was buying aluminum extrusions, and I was buying a wire, which requires a tremendous amount of oil to be made. The kind of wire you put in. Anyway, all three of those, there was none available, Larry. You couldn't even buy it. There was just nothing available. It was kind of like the thing we just went through, where the price was up because everybody was trying to buy it.
There wasn't any available because the demand was so high, and that was true across the board. Across the board. I mean, whether they were oil-derived products, and so many products, of course, were so derived.
Yes.
But it doesn't matter what your demand was for, you couldn't get it. Why? Because everybody had cash and everybody was buying. So, you're looking at the result, but not the cause. And yeah, oil was central to the commodities that went up. But if you were buying iron ore, if you were buying coal, if you were buying
Corn.
if you're buying sand for building supplies, it didn't matter what you were buying. They were almost unavailable. Why? Because everybody had cash to buy from the consumer all the way back to the mines.
Right.
So what you were looking at was a symptom, but not the cause.
Okay, so would you go along with the idea that the oil problem exacerbated this underlying cause?
I think every commodity and every manufactured goods exacerbated it because they were all under great demand.
Well, no, what I'm saying, Larry, is they literally cut it off. So, I mean, in other words, it was like the COVID, where you had no supply of, or you had a dramatically reduced supply of oil because they were not providing us with gasoline or the oil, underpinnings for gasoline, and all of these other products that I'm talking about required oil to make them. And so, to the extent that there was not enough oil, the price of oil went to what? I think at the time, I can't remember. I think it was the first time it was up around 100.
Up
uh,
100, yeah.
$100 a barrel. So I'm just saying it exacerbated. It was you would have had inflation anyway, because obviously we know that the definition of inflation is that if you're putting money into the system, just the basic printing of money all by itself is enough to create inflation. The amount that you print over and above the current supply demand curve is obviously going to create even bigger problems. But then if you take away a big chunk of the economy and say, oh, you can't have any oil, that's going to definitely drive those prices up and everything related to it.
Right. The question is, had there been no demand for oil, would the Gulf states have cut off the supply of oil? And the answer is probably not.
Right.
Just the fact that there was such big demand and they had such pricing power at that point, they could cut it off. So, when you're chasing your tail, what comes first? The mouth or the tail?
Well, anyway, if we use their analysis and we use Chairman Powell's analysis, his worry, and he said this out loud, is that we could have another oil shock because of the things that are going on in the two wars or if you count the Houthis, the three wars. And I'm thinking to myself, you can't be planning your economic thing over black swans. There's no evidence that either one of these.
Powell is saying that he's keeping the money supply tight because there could be another oil shock.
Yeah. I mean, as an example, it's a black swan event. He's like, oh, we've got three wars, and if we don't completely wipe this out, we could have another oil shock, and and that's what Truflation's theory was this morning as well.
I'd be very surprised if intelligent economists really think that. But
think
okay. Look, wars bring their own problems that bigger economic problems, because if a war breaks out, then it's not predictable what will happen.
Right. Well, in this particular case, it's in the Mideast, I guess, is why they're bringing it up. So, Larry, I have a question for you. I don't know why I've never asked you this before or why you've never brought it up. You must have a lot of contacts still out there in the real world, if you will. You had several big companies. You still have your son involved in one of those companies, et cetera. Are you hearing things from the real world that cause you to think is any of that adding to your sense of why you think the economy is in trouble?
Not particularly. I think in the software world, it's always the new that eclipses everything.
Sure.
Right now, AI is eclipsing everything. Everybody's scrambling to get a piece of the AI and to claim their piece is AI and their piece is what's going to win in AI.
Right.
And I've seen this so many times. It's probably this is the nth wave of the new that I've been through.
Yeah.
I was just listening. I was listening to Srinivas, this guy who wrote the book on this new look at America and its economic history. And today I finished the book, and the end of the book, the last portion of the book is on the dot-com bubble.
Uh-huh.
And, as he's talking about the dot-com bubble, I'm just mapping it like step by step by step.
Yeah, right.
The AI bubble.
Yeah.
And we're going through that. So right now, the circles I habitate, they're not thinking about the economy or the current economic climate. They're only focused on one thing, and that's to get their piece of what they know is going to be the next.
Right.
And everybody, as I said, everybody's claiming they have the magic bullet.
Yes.
I actually am forming a theory around that now, based upon some conversations that I've had. But I think these foundation models are going to become commodities.
Yes.
And I think that we haven't seen the shape of the value add pieces that are coming, and maybe it's a robot, maybe it's FSD, maybe that's where the value lies, but it certainly doesn't lie in, you know, a foundation model.
Right.
I think it lies in the proprietary application, the proprietary data or knowledge that's built on top of these language models. Anyway, but so my answer is I don't have a very clear view of anything that's going to be helpful to us.
All right. Well, I think that's all I've got for today, Larry. And oh no, I always, you know, yeah, last night I forgot, and here I was going to forget again to look at where things are standing right now.
Exactly.
We had Tesla. I already know Tesla was up in the after hours also, only a few cents, but that's okay. It was up. We've got the 10-year, basically, I think overall, I looked at this a little while ago. It looks like everybody's kind of on hold, kind of jittery about tomorrow morning with the CPI coming out. Everybody's just kind of nervous. The 10-year is down in the pre-market 0.6%. The 2-year is up 0.4% of a basis point. So not much movement there. And then if we go to oil, I think oil, as I looked earlier, was not moving much either. It is 20 cents. So up 20 cents, $78, right? Exactly in the range where it's been. Natural gas down 1 cent. So not moving very much. We've got the dollar also flat as a board. Gold, 90 cents. Flat. Now, down 90 cents.
Okay, so
Still 90 cents. Out of $2,187, it's down 90 cents. But copper down also a teeny tiny bit, 0.09%.
That's a good sign.
But then listen to this. Bitcoin up today, 3,000. Sitting at 72,472.
Bitcoin's the new gold.
Or not. Anyway, we'll have that. I'm going to read that book someday, and then we'll have that conversation. So we've got the equities. We've got the Dow up 37 right now, or 0.09%. S&P futures up 14, or 0.27%. And we've got the NASDAQ future up 82.45%. So the market.
Everybody's expecting a good CPI tomorrow.
Yeah, a good print, an expected print.
An expected print.
Yeah.
We'll see. Yeah, time will tell.
Okay, all right, Larry. Hey, glad to see that you're making your way across the country in good health and everything's going well in your Tesla.
I should be in Brownsville tomorrow evening.
Yep. And then so far the liftoff is for Wednesday still, or have they made any changes in that?
14th. What day is the 14th? Thursday.
Oh, it's Thursday.
Okay, 14th, yeah. So hopefully all goes well and we have liftoff on the 14th and I'll get home by Sunday.
There you go. All right. Thanks as always, Larry, for jumping on.
Thank you, Randy.
All right. And to all of you out there, it has been great talking to you.